Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the Microsoft 365 Intelligent Intranet. I'm Mark Cashman, here with my co-host Chris, the guy who's got his syntax of his Syntex correct and proper, McNulty.
Thanks, Mark. I will be sure to put that on my Microsoft list. And here at Microsoft, our mission is to deliver solutions to help people and organizations achieve more. We don't do this alone. Each month, we sit down with one of our partners who delivers solutions and services to help our customers achieve more with Microsoft. And on this episode, we'll be talking with Gabriel Caruani, our partner from Clear People, along with their customer, Craig Stanley from Northumbrian Water. Chitty chat.
You're not supposed to read that verbatim. We're just supposed to have chitty chat.
It says chitty chat. Chitty chat bang or something.
Well, let's get to it. Here's some chat. We thought we'd lay a little bit of foundation because when we talked with Gabriel and Craig, they had a ton to share, and it's really interesting to see where they started from, what their goals were, and how they got there. And of course, the role that our partner played and the awareness of what it is that our customer was really wanting. And of course, both of them having a really good sense of the outcome. So we thought we'd lay a little bit of foundation, get into some of what you'll hear them describe in much more detail. But just one of their broader goals was to simplify a lot of their processes. You'll hear a lot of what they were doing was paper-based, and I don't want to say it that they weren't organized, but they weren't as well organized as they are now in the state that they're in. And they would admit to that. So it's really interesting to hear. That's a pretty common goal for a lot of our customers. And there's a lot of partners that do a really nice job of listening and articulating a solution. But it's also unique in hearing how Clear People went about that. To kick it off to Chris, I wanted to get a little clarity on one of the things that they had highlighted for us so that our audience can understand not only what it is, but something that is available through partners that's really a great step to take if it's something that you also want to achieve as an outcome. But the framing is around what we call a knowledge discovery workshop. Clear People knew what that was, and they recommended that to Craig and the Northumbrian Water team. But Chris, for everybody who might not know what that is, can you give a little background of what it is and how it's delivered?
The Knowledge Discovery Workshop, or KDW, because we love our acronyms, is one of a series of solutions that are available through what we call the Microsoft Cloud Accelerator Program, or MCAP. Partners who are registered and qualified through the Microsoft Partner Network, or MPN, so I will stop using acronyms at this point. They can browse the catalog and they can nominate a customer to deliver one of these workshops. And each of these workshops, and the Knowledge Workshop is one of the more recent ones of those, is essentially a workshop in a box, except it doesn't come in a box because it's something that is delivered through a zip file. And it's designed to prepare a partner who's been trained with some train-the-trainer materials, some prep materials, worksheets, guidance, presentations, demos, and the rest, to lead a customer through a 2 to 3 day, not full day, but a couple of hours each day exploration of here's Microsoft's technology in the space so we know what the problems are and have a common vocabulary, walking through a little bit of analysis and development of what business challenges are, along with a ranking of business priorities, and then coming up with a roadmap. And so the Knowledge Discovery Workshop is really aligned to drive solutions in what we call knowledge and content services, or KCS. See, I did it. And that's basically Viva Topics and Syntex. It's a solution that partners can pick up and they can use it. We built it here at Microsoft, combining some different assets around, and we kind of publish it out there so our partners can use that freely. We also, in some cases, can provide some incentives to make it even easier for the partners to be able to deliver those workshops. And so the KDW was in place up until July. And in July, we expanded it to becoming essentially running at the Viva level. There is a workshop that a customer can ask a partner to deliver that will walk through kind of all of Viva and all of Syntex and kind of construct that roadmap for how to take the solution forward.
Yeah, so while I was listening to you in my alphabet soup, I moved over all the letters from your acronyms, and there's a couple left. I will finish it later. It'll stay warm. We've only got a couple more minutes. I think that having the insights to ask the right questions, to know the technology, to know what's the art of the possible, what takes a little bit, what could be leveraging out of the box versus, some things that might need to be built, or as you'll hear, some other technology that comes into play that our partners bring, not just the ability to run the training and the workshop, but actually their technology as an ISV partner to be able to add their value on top. But we'll save that because you'll hear that directly from Gabriel. Interestingly, I think beyond the technology, which you're going to hear a lot of today, two of the outcomes that we thought were just sort of critical points to understand what it is they did and the value that they got out of it. One was that they initially, in the first lifting, brought and migrated 20 million documents to the cloud. And a lot happened upon when those documents landed in the cloud based on what they already had in place, which was a lot of that Syntex and the topics technology. They are also likely planning to have 50 million additional documents coming just in the next year. So that's a lot. And what they're saving, of course, is a lot of time and better discovery of content and better user experience. But they put it into they quantified it also with a dollar number. And for them, it's in pounds. So they're going to expect to save 50 million pounds over the next 36 months.
Or the acronym for pounds is GBP.
So roughly translated for folks that aren't across the pond or in the US, that's about $68 million within the next 36 months or in a 36-month span. And so with a cost savings and certainly the ability to then manage at scale, the other thing that you'll hear when we discuss is the amount of time that they are saving, which is probably the most valuable thing for the employee. There's one other little thing that I just wanted to tease out. You might hear a story of a very old van, but Chris, don't let me say any more. I want our audience to hear it from Craig directly.
Yeah, we've known this story for months, which is part of why we thought it would be great to bring Northumbrian in. So it's not a van down by the river for fans of Saturday Night Live, otherwise known as SNL, you may recall.
Moving over more letters in my soup.
Goodness.
All right. So before the soup gets too cold, Chris, let us bring Craig and Gabriel in and hear more about what Northumbrian Water is doing with a lot of great Clear people and Microsoft technology.
So up next on the IntraZone Partner Edition, we're sitting down with Craig Stanley, production collaboration consultant at Northumbrian Water, and Gabe Karawani, who's the co-founder and director of Clear People. Gentlemen, welcome to the IntraZone.
Hi there. Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. Thank you. And thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me here.
You can just share with us a little bit about what you do at work and anything that, starts to lead us into some of the things that we'll talk about today. And we'll start with Craig.
Yeah, sure. Hi there. I work with Northumbrian Water. My name is Craig Stanley. I work as productivity and collaboration consultant. I've worked in many roles across the business over 20 years, a lot based within the information services part of Northumbrian Water. I've had a lot of roles predominantly around content, and we've seen a lot of change in that period over 20 years and certainly over the last 10 years. It's never been more exciting time to be in this space. And the reason I say that is I think we're closer now to solving some of our long-term challenges now and almost in a way that we haven't been able to in the past. I think we've seen a lot of technology promises being made and an awful lot of them haven't really lived up. So we'll talk about those journeys all during this part really. But I would say now it's very interesting working with Microsoft, working with our partners. I think we're working very differently now. And there's some things that I probably want to go through around how that has panned out for the next 6 months. So yes.
Gabriel, a little bit of sense of what you do with Clear People.
So, well, I'm one of two co-founders. So I guess my official title is co-founder. The reality of my day-to-day is I probably spend maybe half my time in one way or another involved with Microsoft colleagues, various programs, early adoption stuff, et cetera, getting as close to what's next as at all possible. And in that context, working with strategic customers as well, alongside Microsoft customers. And that would, of course, include Craig and his team from Northumbrian Water. The second part of my job is taking a lot of that back to the business and working with our product team, our product director, our product manager, to sort of inform what do we see coming down the line, where are the gaps that we can help fill, where can we help extend the 365 experience, where can we help end users make the best of Microsoft 365 and all the good stuff coming from Microsoft. So I think that's the 110% of my time, and the rest of the time is just other bits.
You and I have spoken about this before, Gabe, but would love to get your explanation of what is Atlas?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's one of those wonderful things that can be different things to different people. But if I had to summarize it up very quickly, I would say Atlas is really targeting organizations that are on or maybe just about to start their 365 journey. It's really all about bringing together knowledge, comms, collaboration into a shared common experience that uses as many of the tools that are already there, that businesses have already invested into. So Teams, SharePoint, Yammer, Planner, and of course, Viva Connections, Viva Topics, SharePoint Syntex. We bring all that together for the users to take advantage of, whether they're inside of Teams or inside of SharePoint. So imagine you go into a team that relates to a project, and imagine that right there in front of you, you've got access to all the knowledge, all the comms, all the documentations you need in the context of that project. When you're working in documents, the context of those documents, that content inside of that team is set to that context. So the flip side is, imagine you're now going to go and do an enterprise search with Atlas, and you're looking for something like change requests. And imagine you can find those change requests across all teams and SharePoint areas, and then say, well, I just want to see those that relate to a particular client, particular customer, and you sliced it down. And that information is all coming back from across all these data silos we're creating all the time with Teams. All that information is coming back in one view. And then maybe I want to slice it down by one project. I'm getting that information in a very, very simple, very, very easy way. So it's really about a friendly, modern experience for employees and external users that you might collaborate with inside of your tenant. And it's about getting the best out of 365 investments. That's really what we're here to do.
Craig, with the Atlas, as maybe a metaphor, as you start to pick up Atlas on your own shoulders and you started to look at what they offer, digging into the solution is where we're headed. But I want to first ask you kind of a broader question. Within what Gabriel was just describing, he used the word knowledge, documents, a lot of things. And I think it's really interesting to understand from your perspective and at Northumbrian Water, what do you consider knowledge and how do you think about knowledge kind of day to day?
In our context, I think of knowledge as two instances, really. I think the first point is what's the collective experiences and the knowledge that we've gathered from the people who have come before me and come behind or before all the other people working inside our organization. I like that idea. There's no story about an Oxford college, isn't there, around, I think it was built in 1379 or something, a new college where they had a dining room that's built out of oak. And they planted oak trees outside that college, knowing that at some point there'll be a need to renew the oak beams or to look and to change that because it'll decay. And that long-term thinking is kind of key, isn't it? So the people who have built Kielder Water, which is the largest man-made lake in Northern Europe, all that work was done, and they've generated some knowledge and some documentation, which is being stored and is there for the people who come next. So I think, how do we gather this information that we've got in paper format, in electronic format, in file shares, and emails, and Teams? How do we gather that all in one place? Historically, we've had some challenges around that. And I think now it's that idea where we bring all that content all together. It's in one place. We can then make sense of it using the tools that Gabe and Clear People have shown us. But we then use Viva and other things like Syntex to add some value and gain some insight from that content. So in terms of that point that we said at the start, saying this is the closest we've come to solving these problems I think it is exactly that, where it allows us to surface the collective knowledge of our organization very simply. And that's in the form of either Atlas, or it might be form of a topic page. And that topic page is really interesting because through the work that we've done with Gabe and with Clear People, is we're starting to uncover this fact that we've got knowledge out of the business that we're not sure about, or we weren't clear about where that knowledge sat. And we're seeing there's a hidden group of hidden experts, if you like, where it's not the noisy people who tell us all the things they know. It's people who are quietly going about their jobs day to day, generating this content and have this expertise. And now with the work we've done with Gabe and with Clear People, with Microsoft around Viva and Syntex, we've got a really simple way of surfacing up that knowledge. And that's a massive change for us.
Craig, let me ask you, what did you hear of first? Was it Clear People or did you hear of Viva?
But I want to make a point around, I think our organization has changed. I also think Microsoft has changed. And I think the way that we interact with Microsoft is really unprecedented in terms of the other partnerships that we've got with people. I meet every other week with our account manager. Our account manager brings opportunities. We'll have a conversation around the problems that we're facing. It's a dialogue. It's a very open dialogue. And I think it was that piece through Stephen and through Richard who highlighted an opportunity to get involved with Clear People, highlighted paid opportunity for us to run a pilot and almost like a POC. And at that point, we're introduced to Gabe and his team. It's almost that piece where it was Microsoft, it was Clear People, and then Gabe introducing us to a range of technologies. And also that piece is very, very different to how we worked previously. How it's also very different to how we work with other organizations. And it's been very, very successful for us over the last 6 months or so.
I honestly, whenever I think of the technology that we're putting in place, your outcome you described as being simple, but the implementation, especially not so much that it's technically difficult to implement. There's just a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of places where your content was, where your content is, where you want your content to be. And I think just the simple training of your people, where it is that they can look or maybe not have to go look, but just that things will start to appear and become a lot more automated. Can we talk just to some numbers? And this might be both a Gabriel and Craig question when it comes to the realities of getting to that simplicity. Some of the work and some of the things to think through. I know there was a lot of documents that were migrated and that there were a lot of systems put in place to help automate the discovery of those documents, or not so much the documents themselves, but the types of documents that they are, maybe through the proof of concept phase or into the run state, however it is to help to describe. Maybe starting with Gabriel, your assessment when you first came across it, what did it all look like? And then Craig, certainly through the stages, how things improved and became what you wanted.
Yeah, if I start with sort of the early conversations with Craig and the team, it was all very conceptual, of course, and going through potential challenges, user journeys where we wanted to improve. One of the problems we often have at that stage is that getting the customer to a stage where we can actually prove the technology can actually work is a bit of a challenge because it needs to go into production environment and the customer needs to open up a lot of stuff. And in this case here, actually Northumbrian Water had an excellent non-production environment, and we were incredibly lucky that Craig could basically load a lot of very, very relevant data in there. I think we were talking about 500,000 content items or even north of that. I can't remember. It was quite a lot for a test environment. And as you might know, with Viva Topics, to really see something useful, to see it start working, you really need at least 20,000 items, ideally much more than that. And we really like to see something that's quite varied, something that on the face of it looks really, really noisy, and that's a little bit of a mess, where it would be difficult through a manual process to make any sense of it, right? So typically you would look at many old archives that have been, many times over, moved from one system to another one, etc. And maybe it ends up in SharePoint Online plus all the other stuff you have. And we were very lucky that because of the content history in Northumbrian Water Group and the ability of Craig to shoot a lot of that into the POC environment, we had exactly that. We had the perfect source. So when we put in Atlas to give us a place to sort of do the demonstration environments and provide that experience, but when we turned on topics and let it start discover a way across all that content, we saw, I think, Craig, within 7 days, 10 days, something like that, we saw real stuff coming out of it. And that's quite a unique position to be in a non-production environment. How many topics did we see within a week or 2 weeks? It was many.
Yeah, it was an awful lot, really. I think part of that success of the initial pilot, I think it's down to you, Gabe, and the process that was used through Microsoft, where there was a lot of hard yards that were done at the start. So we had a lot of workshops, brought in some people in the business, and we were very focused. But I think a learning point for me was that process that is put in place by Microsoft and clear people guide me through that very structured workshop process allowed us to really focus in on our value. And I think there was a few focused user stories and personas that were developed. So I'd say a key learning point from this is having that focus and be narrow at first around where the value is, but also I think it's really beneficial having a partner to guide you through that, because it can be confusing. And there's been a lot of, I'd say, late night conversations between myself and Gabe around, I think, just throwing some ideas around and being able to tap into Gabe and his team and their expertise. And I think the expertise of a partner who's seen these kind of issues before is so important, really, because that's really helped us to focus in on the value and I think move forward quite quickly.
We also learned a few new things, Craig, in terms of some of the document formats you threw at us caused a little bit of a challenge, which was interesting. Some unusual drawing formats, shall we say.
So I just wanted to ask a little bit about the experience you had during your initial discovery. So you found many more topics than you had anticipated, which sounds like a surprise. What did you do with that?
Well, actually, it's that whole thing about value, isn't it? Specifically, I think we've got some significant challenges, or we've had some significant challenges around information discovery. If the content is not in one place and you don't have access to it, how do you, as an end user, find the information you need to start a project? So in our world, we've got basically 170 plus sites or asset locations that we're working on over this next year. As a project manager starting off, that initial information discovery phase is very difficult. Now the content's in SharePoint, and now that we're pulling in information from our file shares, now that we've got Viva in place, it's starting to identify and collate and match up this content into a set of topics that are on the money in terms of what our project managers are actually looking for. So it means that we can curate a set of topics that are relating to the projects and the locations in our capital program. That immediately has helped me. So I would get some day-to-day queries about, is there any sort of information about a specific location? Historically, I've had to run some manual searches or run some PowerShell scripts or some other Power BI reports to try and find that. Now I'm seeing that there's more opportunities to find that content by the way that Viva is surfacing up the content, and specifically surfacing up the sites that that content resides in. And in some cases, it's 30 to 40 separate SharePoint sites where that information resides, all locked down or with different permissions model. So I would say as a standard user, you haven't got a hope of finding that really. It has to be done centrally. But I think that ability to surface that up in Viva has been really key for us, really.
Can you help describe some of the drawings that it's finding and how they're surfaced in combination with other things in topics? Maybe just to give some categories of topics that you have seen discovered, but then how they lead to people, finding either those right drawings or the right people. What just to get a little sense of what the drawings look like and how you're using them through topics.
To take two specific examples, in our world of water and sewage services, if you take the example of a water treatment works, I did on one hand the raw water comes in from a reservoir or a river or a source. It goes through a number of different processes. Each one of those processes has some kind of assets or some kind of process in there that's described in a set of documents. Those documents might be a drawing, so it might be a physical engineering drawing, an AutoCAD drawing. It might be an old scan drawing. On some of our older sites, we've got things on linen that were scanned in. So a whole series of records, really. And those drawing records tells us what's there. It might be as a starting point of a very old set of drawings when the original site was built. It'll go through a different set of iterations when projects come along and make changes to those processes. Interestingly, for our Howden site, which is a sewage treatment work site, something really interesting happened inside Viva, where it was able to look across and they started to pull out all the different references and the different terms that specific site had been called over the years. It ended up being going through kind of different naming conventions and changes, and different parts of the site were called lots of different things at various times. It was interesting that without any intervention, it was able to identify and pick up a lot of those synonyms. I think it's also flagged from Gabe, really, where he almost didn't believe that it happened. He thought that
I remember that day.
Mindly entered that. But yeah, so it also immediately looked across the drawings. So it's a range of engineering drawings, a range of PDFs, images, Word documents. He said, pull out a summary about that site. So it's able to provide a nice little summary in terms of what each site was. And then it pulled out the individual names that historically has been called over the years.
I'm going to assert that there's two things going on there. A really good algorithm, and at Microsoft, we understand rebranding. So the patterns of rebranding maybe led to that, but that's pretty cool to hear. And maybe that's part of what Gabriel was hinting at, that there are some things that were, delightful, right next to some things that were challenging in terms of being able to give the AI or give the humans the right way to describe something so that the automation could take hold. Gabriel, beyond the kind of the nice discovery of this name over the years and it being identified properly, what's one example of one where you had to kind of tune it a little bit?
Well, I think a lot of the fine tuning is probably more on the SharePoint Syntex side of things, where it's very narrow. It's very narrow models that you build, and you try to make it really effective in terms of that content intelligence piece and picking out information that you need and automating that process of pulling out additional metadata over and above what we might get from the location we put it in with Atlas. And there we certainly had some challenges. We'll continue to have some challenges, I'm sure, Craig, because, for instance, a lot of those drawing formats are old. They might have originally been plotted out on an A0 or A1 plotter. So you can imagine the fonts there, and things might just not sit in the right place, etc. So there are some real challenges there to go through. I think we are on the path to solving some of those. I mean, of course, there are some things that absolutely fine, easy enough to deal with in the SharePoint Syntex models, but clearly there are some things that we will have to work some more on. But if we, and I'm confident we will, if we crack that nut, we are on to sort of the next level of adding value in Northumbrian Water. There's no doubt.
Again, it's been useful both in terms of the expertise we can call upon through Gabe and his team, but also as a result of the engagement with Gabe, I've been involved in the Insider program, so Ferris program. And that's been great because it's allowed us specifically to take the challenges that we're experiencing, because not everything is working as we want it to be. So we've got some very clear ideas about how we want to use the product and what challenges we want to solve with it. And having that opportunity to feed into the product team has been invaluable, because it certainly allowed me to educate myself and to learn from all the other people on there. And I think it's just stressing how much we have learned and how much I've learned personally from both Microsoft and from Gabe and his team. It's been a huge journey for us, and I'm hugely grateful for that.
Craig, I'm going to ask you to pause there for a second, because Mark and I are familiar with Pharos. Pharos is more than the fabled Lighthouse of Alexandria. It is a program that Microsoft runs. Could you kind of describe what your experience has been inside of Pharos, what it is?
Yeah, so I was invited into the Pharos program a series of conversations with Gabe, and I spoke to a lady called Jill who was able to walk me through that and able to invite me into that program. And basically, it's a weekly meeting where I spend an hour and they play back some elements that may be coming into the products in future releases. It's a sounding board where they get to show what could be coming this on basis of the roadmap and kind of all of the features that have actually been decided. But it's also a very interesting dialogue. So end up generating lots of conversations both inside those calls and outside, where it allows us to basically take some ideas back and have a think about all things that may be coming. And that's really allowed us to shape our thinking, then go back into future meetings and think about all the things that we'd like to see inside the product, and also specifically identify some real world challenges that are coming from our use of Syntex or also Viva. So allowed us to go back and challenge a little bit, I guess, and to share some experiences and to also add some things into a wish list of things that we hope to be in the product, really.
You may not realize it, but it's an extension of the knowledge services of Syntex to actually listen to customers and understand what you want and be able to deliver.
I think that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Gabe, I wanted to come back to you. You mentioned Syntex, and Syntex is, one of the pillars of our knowledge and content services story. I'd love to hear you describe what Syntex does in your own words as a product.
I get asked about that quite a lot, and what's the difference between topics and Syntex. So the way I describe it is that you got to imagine that you've got documentation in your business coming in or going out, and you want to file that away in a sensible way. In the past, there is no way you could drag people through anything to get them to tag up documentation. And the opportunity with Syntex really is to automate that process, but thinking about it in very, very narrow focus scenarios. So Syntex can help you when you got high volume of, for instance, a certain type of agreement coming into the business, and you need to pull out relevant information, get it tagged up to make sure it appears and it's stored in the right place. So, end to end, you go in, create a simple model, says, I am looking for a document of this type. I'm going to tell the model how to look for it, how to recognize that kind of document. Once I know that this is a service order, I now wanted to pull out two details from that service order. I want the customer name and I want the service order date. And that is what Syntex does. So it's very narrow, very specific, but highly efficient and can be highly automated.
Craig, if you see that it's discovering content in a way that it knows it or is being trained, does it ever lead to you structuring the documents even more so that it is more discoverable, or adjusting it so that it aligns to discover more of the same?
Yeah, sure. So I think it challenges us to do more in terms of thinking about our overall information architecture. And I think the whole piece of work that we're doing with Gabe and his team is exactly that, where we've got a workshop planned next week or week after, I think, looking at that. So we've learned some things from what we've seen. We've learned some things from what we've experienced with Gabe and his team and through Microsoft that we wanted to now take back to the business and look to input on there. I think on the Syntex one, where almost back that idea of like the promise of technology hasn't always delivered, I would say as a user, kind of historically, that idea of being able to go into a library, being able to head to a cabinet of drawings, being able to pull out a drawing or some microfiche, which has been well indexed, and then taken that into an electronic content management system, and it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked as well as that piece. Now we're seeing actually it's starting to get there, isn't it? Because we're starting to take those scanned drawings, we now have a consistent set of naming conventions and a consistent set of metadata, which is the site and the type of drawing. And if we've got those two pieces of information, it largely matches what was replicated in that physical library of drawings, really. So, yeah, it's absolutely changed our ideas around how we want to structure and actually simplifying. I think in the past, we've tried to have 12 different metadata types, and we want those all updated by users at the point that the files were uploaded. And it's just not practical. It's not going to work. Automation, folder structures, metadata, term sets, those are all things that are starting to ease out through using Atlas and Viva and Syntex, really.
And in fact, if I can jump in with one of the use cases we talked about way back in the discovery, which we then took through to the POC, which I found really interesting because there's real value here. You've got those CCTV reports on the back of video recordings or CCTV video recordings that are done. And so without going into too much detail, when there is a problem in a sewer, they might send a little thing down, record some video of that. One of the problems was when that information came back, it might get used once, it might not get used immediately, but after some time, the team that are looking into this particular issue that it might not be able to find that video. And that actually means they have to send a whole team out again, do the whole video recording process one more time, upload it again. So that's quite a costly thing to keep on repeating. And what we were able to show using Syntex, we were actually able to extract the information from, in a central location where these recordings land and the reports land. We're able to extract the information in terms of job number, the location, etc., meaning it's highly unlikely you wouldn't be able to find that in the future when you need to go back and look at that video.
And automation is key, really, Gabe, isn't it? So in terms of if we're migrating 20 million documents from our file shares, we aren't realistically ever going to manually tag those files. So we have to look to technology. And we're seeing value is coming through Viva and also through Syntex, where we're starting to identify models around our key types of documents. And then we're seeing this has been quite a really good way of adding insight and usability to this content, whereas otherwise it's as good as lost, isn't it? If you just migrate a file share and there's no structure or metadata, it's very difficult to find what you need.
Mark, I know we talked earlier with them about the volume of content that they migrated in, but I think you had a question about a very untraditional thing that they migrated to M365, which might have been a vehicle.
I want to put it in the right way because I actually think it might be disclosing some new SharePoint Syntex capabilities. So, Chris, stop me if I'm revealing too much before it's been publicly disclosed properly. But there is a new VRE service, I believe, that we're working on. And it's very specific to Northumbrian Water because the VRE system, which I think is now in early testing phases, is a van recognition engine. I think it's the most fascinating thing that we're doing in the product to date. But all joking aside, I think it leads into what is this story with the van and this importance of the van, what was in the van. I don't want to reveal because we kind of know, but I'd love to hear the importance of the van and what you did with it.
Our organization is quite rural in its nature. So in parts of Northumberland, there's lots of outlying rural areas, lots of farms. A lot of those farms have long stretches of mains leading up to the actual various pipes in the farm buildings. And one of our reps had been a long-standing rep in a specific area, had a lot of knowledge of that area, and had been out to lots of farms and was involved in lots of different investigations, finding leaks and finding issues. After an awful lot of years in the same van, it was time to change out his van. And it was time for him to get a new shiny van, mod cons, all nice stereo. Everything changes really. And he just didn't want to change. He was adamant, no, he's quite happy with his old van. This went on and on, a few conversations. And eventually over time we teased it out and then we saw what was in his van. And we realized that...
That's usually the beginning of a scary sentence.
Yeah,
saw what was actually in his van.
Yeah, exactly. So,
my sister once brought a car to the mechanic complaining of a squeaking sound coming from the rear wheels. And it was because as a young college student, she had deposited so much trash in her back seat and the footwells that there was a mouse that was living in her car.
It turned out after a few conversations and investigation of the van, when we peered inside, then what we'd realized is when our rep had been out to these various sites, as he was on the phone and describing these issues, he was sketching out the farm, he was sketching out the map because he was on the phone, he wasn't able to reach out with pen and paper. So over time, we've drawn out lots of different elements of our assets and the farms and the different locations as to where that was. So inside this van was like a Sistine Chapel type set of drawings where there was lots of information about our assets. What we ended up doing was take lots of pictures of that, and we ended up being able to print those out and store those electronically for them. He was able to go on and actually have those. But I think it shows the information comes in many different forms, I guess.
I love it. And I can imagine that somewhere in your territory, there's a museum that you've been able to represent that on the walls through the discovery of obviously him, loving the van, but loving it for a reason, and converting that into, like you said early on, knowledge that could be passed down or that he could just use with the new van, whomever might get benefit from it. Fascinating that those drawings kind of live and breathe everywhere. And it probably was one of the more important captures that you did, but for the sake of his job or whomever came after him.
No, that's right. It's interesting. An interesting case study.
It's been really fascinating to hear. I think the combination of how you're working with Clear People and certainly, Gabriel, how you're connected with Microsoft. And it sounds like a really nice trifecta of going through the stages of discovery, both of what the solution can provide, what it is providing. And it sounds like, from what I've read, from a projections perspective, that you don't see it slowing down. And to go from, you mentioned, Craig, 20 million documents to then maybe doubling that in some form of time in the near future, that you're really set for success and refining. Like you said, it's never over. Very much love hearing what it is that you're sharing and putting a lot more context to Syntex for Viva topics and the combination of the value that it's brought you.
It's really good today. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us on, Mark and Chris. Cheers, eh? Thank you.
Be well, and pleasure chatting with you. Well, we're back. Now it's just you and me, Mark, and of course thousands and thousands of listeners around the world. What'd you think?
I think it was great. Always hearing some of the really initial outset of, we were very paper-based and it was just dragging down. In this modern era, we really had to get out of that. But imagine just literally reams and stacks of papers and things in drawers. And, it's obviously well organized in a paper world. But to move off of that, that's a big project just to think about. And through the workshop and getting with the right partner, it was really great to hear, getting from what was, fairly rigid in this new modern way that they wanted to work, to actually be there. And I think now even jump ahead where a lot of people are, that leveraging a lot of that automated capability. It was really fascinating to hear.
So there's two things I wanted to emphasize, is that for some reason, water companies overseas, especially in the UK, are pioneers about leveraging technology to get the most out of an aging physical infrastructure, because water systems have been in place for decades. And so I'm always energized by getting to talk to overseas to the water company. Clear People is interesting. I first met Gabriel a couple of years ago, and Clear People was, as it is then, it's a mid-sized consultancy and a partner of Microsoft. They've been a fantastic partner for us. And, we know that there are many, many other customers with similar stories, although not similar vans. But it's interesting to see kind of the evolution of what's been going on there. It used to be there was a clear distinction between partners who were integrators who would come in and install something and configure it and get you going and walk away, and partners who were on the ISV side or independent software vendor. I don't know why I'm doing so many acronyms today.
My letters are all gone, Chris. I ate it while they were speaking.
Is this Hangman?
No, I finished my soup.
There was a clear split between SI, systems integrators, and ISVs. We've seen the rise of people who were traditional integrators developing software development capabilities. And at the same time, traditional software developers start to bring in professional services and implementation. And so Clear People is one of these real hybrid firms. They definitely have software solutions that they are bringing out into the market. And at the same time, they also have the ability to go in and be consultative and to integrate other things with Microsoft. And, I think it makes it much smoother from a customer perspective. But anyway, love seeing the innovation that's going on there.
Yeah, I love it as well. And I think it's a great mix. It's kind of the double punch of people that are able to build a product that they see as a repeatable thing that a lot of people want, but also the reality of a lot of customers want something a little special or a lot special because they have unique requirements or want specific outcomes. And to be able to do both is obviously a really good business model. And in our space, we are both an app and a platform. We know it well, and I think it's almost a no-brainer that partners, should approach it that way, especially if they have the scale to do both. We want to thank our guests, Gabriel and Craig, for sharing everything that they spoke about today.
Check out our show page for links to everything we talked about today and more. Visit us at aka.ms/theintrozone. And Mark, should I spell out what HTTPS means?
Hypertext something or other protocol
Transfer
services.
Protocol Security.
Security, yeah. We want you to send us your questions or your feedback by mail at theintrozone@microsoft.com or find us on Twitter at SharePoint, at mcashman, and at cmcnulty2000.
Tell all your friends and colleagues about the show and share that Microsoft 365 love. Follow the show at your local World Series venue or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you again for listening. We're your hosts, Mark Cashman and Chris McNulty, and you've been listening to The Introzone, a show about the Microsoft 365 partner-powered, all of us piled in a van, intelligent intranet.